Medieval monastery, I hear you say. Today we're going to be looking around Castle Acre Priory to answer that question which has probably been bothering you the whole of your life, which is, what was life like for an English monk in the 16th century? We're going to start off our journey in this, what would have been the centre of the monastic community here at Castle Acre Priory, which is the Priory Church. So if you come in here with me, you can see the way up to the altar lined with Gothic columns, or what were Gothic columns, leading the way to the high altar, which was facing east towards the Holy Land, east towards Jerusalem. So at the time when this monastery was at its peak, it probably had around 50 monks living inside, each of which had their own servant. So in total, probably about 150 people living here at the same time, coming to worship in this church. The monks would have sang the daily offices from matins to complin, the evening prayer, and then would have retired to bed to wake up probably around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning every day, and again make their way back into the church to start off the day. So, do you need a little downtime after you've been praying so hard in your monastic services? Are you a little tired after getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to come and sing the monastic office every day of the week, and particularly on feast days? If so, you can come and have a bit of a rest here in the dormitory. So as far as we know, or as far as sources tell us, or as far as the space allows, the dormitory was home to about 15 to 20 monks, all living on 2 floors of this building right here. You can see here the pillars, the columns, which would have held up the first floor of this building. At the very end of the building was the access to the most important part of the monastery, which was the church, and these were the night stairs, which still remain kind of visible today. You can see it going in a slope up there and towards the church. There's no evidence to suggest that the monks had their own rooms here. There's no stones or any partitioned parts of this building, but it was normal practice for monks in Tudor times to have their own small cubicle, their own part of private world where they could sit and contemplate, read and pray. I'm now standing in over 500 years of human detritus. This is the world's best preserved medieval monastic toilet. And you can see here where the stonework's now faded away used to form a layer over the top of what was part of the river Nar. So what would happen, the monks would come here, they'd communally gather sometimes to go to the toilet, and their poo would get washed away by the flowing water, fresh flowing water, down the river, downstream to where the village was, unfortunately for the villagers. Entering what's called the Cloister. Now this is very similar to what you will have at school, which is a central garden surrounded by arched passageways where the monks could gather and talk so long as they were allowed to do so at that particular time of day. Now this was another central part of the monastery because it was the social hub, it was the place where monks would gather, and it was also a place of rest and relaxation and a place of contemplation where monks could sit together, talk together and pray. Come inside and let me tell you the story of the abbot of Castle Acre Priory. So this is the room owned by Prior John Winchelsea, the head of Castle Acre Priory, appointed in 1510. He was the person who lavishly decorated this room. He gave it a fireplace, not a fire extinguisher, not my mum. He decorated the walls, and he gave it a new, beautiful roof, which at the time, and quite ironically, was decorated with the Tudor rose, the symbol of the very king who was going to close this monastery, close this priory down in 1537. We're going to walk through now into the Pryors Chapel. Now, this was a sacred space which the prior used to pray, and Prior John Winchelsea, in his time of lavish decoration, decorated the chapel with beautiful paintings, and some of these can still be seen today. If you look very closely on the wall behind me, just In the left-hand side of the frame, you can see some of these remaining decorations which existed around the altar. And all this goes to show that Castle Acre Priory was a very wealthy place. But there's one thing we haven't yet mentioned and we haven't yet talked about, which is why this monastery is desolate. Why is it in ruins and why does it look so destroyed? And the answer is, of course, big old bad Henry VIII. So the year is 1537, and following Henry VIII's divorce and marriage to his new wife Anne Boleyn, there's a new set of rules in town. The head of the church in England used to be the Pope. He has now been kicked out in terms of his relationship with the English church, and instead Henry VIII had installed himself as the supreme head of a new church in England. Not yet the Church of England, not yet the Anglican Church, but the church in England. As far as Henry VIII is aware, this church is still Catholic. He is still a very strong Catholic. But the problem is that many of his followers, many of his adherents at court aren't. They are following the new craze from across the Channel, which is the Protestant Reformation. And in that Reformation, there is not a place for monks, there's not a place for monasteries, there's certainly no place for any type of Catholic ritualistic practice. What that means for England is that the monasteries are about to be dissolved. The Act of Supremacy passed through the English Parliament in 1534 and gave Henry the right to close down over 800 religious houses. These houses owned over 16% of the English land, which meant that they generated a huge amount of wealth, which now went towards Henry VIII and his loyal followers. Abingdon, Bath, Charterhouse, Westminster, Worcester and Castle Acre, to name a few, were all dissolved. The communities of monks and nuns which lived there were now sent away to find other occupations and livelihoods. Throughout the whole of England, over 12,000 people were cast out of the places that they had called home. Over 1/50th of the people in England had been a member of a religious order, and now they were without a place to go. As our story here at Castle Acre Priory draws to a close, what we can remember is that this priory was once a thriving community, of benefit to the local village, providing employment for servants for the monks, also providing a spiritual place where masses could be offered and said for the souls of the departed and the souls of those still living on earth, if you had enough money to pay for them. But things changed dramatically for Castle Acre. In 1537, Henry VIII gave the order to dissolve the monasteries, having accused them of wilful sins, of corruption, of greed, of extortion of the towns and villages which they inhabited. He had the monks rounded up, and the wealth and land of most of the monasteries in England given to either himself or his men. The money, instead of being used to fund the art and architecture of the monastic houses, now predominantly went towards Henry VIII's wars on the continent. The flame of Catholicism had all but gone out in England.